Hello, my name is Daniella. I'm 20 years old and from Southampton on the south coast of England. I have one younger sister and was raised in what I can only describe as an evangelical Anglican Protestant family. Majority of my Christian education was through Sunday school and my Church of England in name but not really in practice primary school. I don't remember reading the Bible beyond the stories all Christian children know, usually involving a person and some animal. David and Goliath, Jonah and the whale, Daniel in the lion's den. And my favourite part of church was the songs with the cool actions. Throughout my childhood, we moved churches frequently, and I had regularly attended 3 different ones by the time I was 15. I remember being scared that I wasn't actually saved most of my childhood. But my first memory of being scared for my salvation was when I was a young child, and one of my friends told me that because I hadn't prayed the special prayer, accepting Jesus as my saviour, I wasn't really Christian, and Jesus could come at any time to take away the people who hadn't said the prayer. That evening, I told my parents I wanted to say this special prayer, and they encouraged me, saying there was much rejoicing in heaven because I had decided to follow Jesus myself. But really, my friend's comment had frightened me into praying it. Then, as I got older, I began to question why people go to church, and mentally decided that once I was old enough to stop, I would. I didn't necessarily question God or Protestantism, but I didn't see the point in actually attending church services. The earliest I remember questioning the Protestant church was at 14 when we were learning about the Elizabethan era in my history class. I had been raised with the belief that Catholics were a false sect claiming to be Christian, but they aren't real Christians because they teach things that aren't in the Bible, and they worship Mary as a 4th member of the Trinity. Side note, I now know this isn't true. However, learning that the Anglican Church, which is the denomination I was currently attending, was set up by Queen Elizabeth I as a middle way to appease both the Catholics and Protestants frustrated me. I had questions like, who gave her the authority to set up a new church? And why do my Protestant family attend a church that has Catholic elements, if Catholics are false Christians? That summer, I attended a very evangelical Christian camp over the holiday, which was supposed to rejuvenate your faith and prepare you to return back to school as an evangelist. At this camp and within my church, there was a large focus on God moments, or turning points in your faith, and having a supernatural encounter. But I felt nothing. Despite strengthening most people's faith, it left me convinced God hated me. I started to believe that God wanted nothing to do with me, and that maybe I had done something wrong without realizing it. I was left feeling empty, and it seemed God was with everyone else but didn't see me. I felt so much pressure to feel God, but didn't. There was also a large emphasis on prophecy and receiving words or images for yourself or other people, but I never received anything, and no one ever had anything for me, reinforcing the belief that God just didn't care about me. I always knew God existed, but thought he was only interested in certain people, and there was nothing you could do to make him like you if you weren't one of the special ones he'd chosen. I viewed him as a tyrant who had favorites and ignored everyone else. In addition, I felt very alone in the church environment and isolated in the youth groups because the other people all seemed closer with each other and didn't really spend much time with me. They appeared to have forgotten I existed, so I stopped enjoying church and church-related events because everyone thought I had friends there, but really I didn't. Within a few months of returning home from this camp, my life as I had known it was completely changed. First, my grandfather was diagnosed with cancer, which meant that my mum was rarely around as she was either working or looking after him, and we had to adapt to functioning as a house of 3 very rapidly. Family life was all over the place. Not long after this, the coronavirus hit, and England entered its first national lockdown. Within 2 days, I had gone from receiving my final exam timetable to having left school with no idea what would happen regarding my exams and no work to fill my days. I completely lost my purpose. But externally, it appeared little had changed because school, youth groups, and Sunday services had just moved online, so I was able to continue with everything as before. I even began to take more of a leadership role within the children's ministry in my church, and began a Bible study with a friend that I didn't really enjoy but didn't think I could get out of. So from the outside, no one would have suspected the doubts and questions that filled my mind. Around 6 months later, following the death of my grandfather, I spent a lot of time contemplating the afterlife, and my fear of not being saved returned strongly. I remember waking up one night terrified that if I died then, I was damned to hell. I opened my Bible, and while now I can't remember what I read, I do remember that it sparked a desire in me to research further. This further research led me to 2 James 19, which I found very difficult to reconcile with my understanding of Christianity. Even the demons believe and tremble. In light of this verse, the simple explanation I was being given, just believe in Jesus and you'll be fine, didn't make sense to me. But when I tried to express my thoughts and concerns with Protestant friends, I felt shut down and invalidated by them. Having Bible verses dumped on me and being told I just needed to pray more pushed me even further away, although I know they were just trying to help. In addition to already being physically isolated during lockdown, this crisis of faith left me feeling isolated from the one community I was trying to cling on to, my church friends and even my family, because while I no longer knew what I believed, I knew it wasn't the same as them. I was very lonely, and without the stability of faith, I fell into darkness and depression. Instead of turning to God, I used unhealthy methods to try and numb the pain. Without God in it, my life was rapidly spiraling out of my control, which was terrifying. I was scared of where I'd end up if nothing changed, which sparked the beginning of my conversion, because I realized that I needed God in my life and missed being a Christian. I was certain a God existed, I just didn't understand Jesus, and knew I couldn't return to the church my parents went to. Therefore, as my grandfather's family had been converts from Judaism, I briefly researched into that, but realized it didn't add up either. Due to the physical loneliness I felt during lockdown, I sought social interaction online and ended up getting very involved with an online community focused on the Chronicles of Narnia. I've loved the Narnia stories as long as I can remember, and they hold a very special place in my heart. So this community, which is predominantly Christian, was a safe place I could escape to. Within it, there are both Catholics and Protestants who share their love of Narnia despite the religious differences. And this was the first time I saw Catholics as Christians. I made friends in the community, and as I began asking faith-related questions, I found the Catholics provided a better example of Christianity for me than the Christians I knew in real life had. One of them shared a video about how the Catholic Bible has extra books, which is something I'd never heard of before. So I watched the video and many others about the differences between Catholics and Protestants, many of which were entirely new to me. Through the Narnia community, I was guided towards resources where I was able to carry out my own further research into Catholicism. They weren't trying to convert me. They know their faith is the truth, so all I needed was resources, and they let me come to my own conclusion. Initially, I was so stuck in sola scriptura that I refused to accept their answers if they couldn't back it up with the Bible. But between YouTube videos and Catholic answers, I learned so much, and the more I learned, the more I wanted to know. There were things I didn't even know the Catholic Church believed that solved my issues with the Protestant Church, and I found myself agreeing with things that a few months ago I hadn't even known people believed. For example, I didn't realize people still believed in purgatory. All I knew from history lessons was that it was a medieval belief when people were uneducated in the Middle Ages. I did so much research that I began to neglect my schoolwork and soon realized I couldn't go back to being Protestant. Then I began a period of waiting. I found my local Catholic church and began watching their masses online, while also still watching the services from my Protestant church. I contacted the church asking to begin RCIA, which is a program converts have to go through before they can join the church. However, because I was 17 and didn't have parental permission, I wasn't allowed to start. Therefore, I waited, and the moment I turned 18 began the process of officially entering the Catholic Church. That Easter, over a year after I'd initially decided to become Catholic, I was fully received, and finally told my parents about my decision. The waiting was difficult because initially I didn't have any Catholic support offline, and many of my Protestant friends took this as their opportunity to try and convert me back. I found myself defending a church that I wasn't yet an official member of against very outspoken evangelical Christians who, like me, had been raised with an anti-Catholic mindset and thought they knew more than I did about Catholicism. I also got kicked out of my college's Christian union for being too Catholic by these same people that I thought were my friends. They were partially successful because I began to doubt my decision to become Catholic, as I realized how much it meant I would lose. But in the end, I kept coming back to the research I'd done, and something deep inside of me knew that it's the truth, which prevented me from going back. My name is a derivative of Daniel, and while I was living at home, the only Catholic among Protestants, I gained a great understanding and love for my name. I felt very much like Daniel in exile in Babylon, obeying God and following the true faith, while everyone around me practiced differently. The loneliness I'd felt during lockdown was still present, and the lack of support surrounding me only enhanced it. So I fell back into the depths of depression. But this time I wasn't struggling alone. I'd been on such a journey for so long, seeing God reveal himself to me in a way that I understood, and recognized that for some unknown reason he'd chosen to show me the truth and guide me to his church, which meant that I could no longer believe he wasn't interested in me. Slowly, the Lord began introducing me to other Catholics, starting with one of my teachers, whose wife teaches the RCIA program in their church. He was very supportive and encouraging throughout this time, especially as I was still living at home. At the end of the year, this teacher invited me to come on a youth camp that he helps with, run by a community of Dominican sisters, and I went along that summer. This was my first experience of being among other young Catholics and in a completely Catholic environment. I felt free and made many wonderful friends there that I'm still in contact with today. I also got to know Jesus as a person in a new way that I hadn't before, and the knowledge that led me to the Catholic Church began to move from my head to my heart. The following September, I went to Cardiff University in Wales and lived in the chaplaincy with other like-minded young Catholics in a community setting, and this really helped develop the early faith within me. However, as much as I liked the environment at university and where I was living, I didn't enjoy studying or my course, so decided not to continue with it. Partway through that year, the chaplaincy invited the Dominican sisters whose camp I had been on over the summer. I was talking to one of those sisters, and she suggested I take a gap year to discern and figure out where the Lord is leading my life. And one of the suggestions she made for the gap year was to come to Holy Family Mission. I did some more research, took it to prayer, decided to apply, and here I am. I'm glad I trusted God and followed him through my conversion, because he's given me new friends who support and share the faith, allowed me to experience genuine joy and growth throughout all aspects of my life, and provided opportunities I never could have imagined. Thank you for listening to my ramblings and your ongoing support of Holy Family. We remain united in prayer. God bless.